Right, the Reds, it's Talking Reds. It is Friday. Most people don't even seem to know what day it is at the moment, me included, but it is, I am assured, Friday. I've got Rob Gutmann with me. We're just going to have a chat about all the latest, really. There is a Premier League meeting today, but already it's sort of superseded almost by some of the stuff in the press this morning, Rob, which makes it sound like we're not going to hear anything groundbreaking today, really. It sounds like it'll be sort of kicked into the grass a little bit. There's reports that there is another meeting now already scheduled for next Thursday, when the 20 clubs will discuss at their a different meeting. It's a shareholders meeting today. There's a different meeting next Thursday. It's Thursday's meeting where they're going to discuss plans for potentially returning on June the 8th. But there seems to be a bit of a shift this week, I think, in sort of mindsets, in terms of reporting, in terms of what we're hearing. We're hearing more now from players, including some players who are, expressing concerns about coming back and concerns around their family and friends and pregnant wives and elderly relatives and all the stuff that, concerns everyone, I guess. And then we've had the situation in France as well, where PSG have been crowned champions, and they put it all over social media that the champions, they're celebrating being champions, and their season didn't get done. It does seem, we were speaking obviously before today's meeting and before Thursday, but it does seem right now that still there is a will to get it done in this country.
Yeah, I mean, the seismic shift or event of the week was what happened in France, as you've referenced. The government took the conversation out of the hands of the footballing bodies, and that's what makes this today and next Thursday sort of moot, unless ahead of a government steer on this one. Although in this country, a lot of the press has gone that the meetings and decisions being made are sort of not even tacitly, but covertly hand in hand with the government. We've had all kinds of briefings akin to it. In England, the government are keen for football to resume, seeing it as a national morale booster, even a ruse to keep people stuck in front of their tellies rather than going out. Maybe it's even, I don't know, aid safety in a certain sense. The French event moved the conversation in two directions, one of which doesn't help and one of which possibly does. The one that doesn't, if we're being parochial about this and talking, and we're a football podcast, so we can talk about football without feeling shame about it. We would like to see the season resume at some point, and we would like to see Liverpool win the league at some point. If we're to be denied that, being awarded the league seems fair and right, and the precedent set in France of awarding Paris Saint-Germain the league is good news. There's a part of me, probably you and most of us, that doesn't really want to go down the route of even acknowledging that, because it sort of then plays into the momentum of, let's just call this whole thing done. Let's not continue the season. Should we continue the season or not is a twofold debate as well, because it's a debate about, well, you could say it's all about risk and reward. This whole analysis at this time, even in lockdown, there's an element of risk, because it's not there's almost no such thing as perfect isolation unless we all went into our own rooms and passed each other food under doors, and even then it's not perfect. So everything's a compromise. So there's a lot of talk about football should only resume when it's safe to do so. Safe's a big word, I'm not being glib by saying it's dangerous. Life is dangerous. Crossing the road is dangerous. But safe is a journey we're on with coronavirus. So one, we do not know what safe looks like or equals. There's talk about it's the other side of a vaccine. Well, vaccines aren't necessary, even they aren't necessarily panaceas to virulent enough viruses and diseases. So we don't know. So we don't even know. There isn't an absolute point of safety. I think that needs to be said at some point. Having said that, there's also, I don't see why there has to be an absolute, as you and I talked about earlier, a rush to get this up and started. The next season is a less of a priority than the current one. I don't see why that can't be acknowledged, and we can't play from that point. And if we don't start in June and we start in July or August or even October, and next season ends up being a truncated season where every game's played on neutral ground, or you play half home, half away, and there's no effective two legs. Who knows? But the mood that says let's just throw this season under a bus because, oh, the humanity. It's a bullshit argument, and too often it's coming from places which aren't coming at it with good faith, quite frankly.
Yeah, there is that. There is that. And there is an aspect for me that almost everyone's right. So there's lots of like really sort of passionate and angry debates that you can see at every turn on social media. And I need to fix it because it's such a mad situation. And, this is the longest gap in football since the war. So to have, it's not something anyone's dealt with before. So we're going to have to sort of feel our way to some imperfect solution. And everyone's got to sort of accept that at some point. What hasn't been helpful, and you're talking about not being helpful, it wasn't helpful, was it, from the Liverpool mayor, Joe Anderson, to come out with what he came out with? And obviously, immediately we had statements from Liverpool and statements from Spirit of Shankly. I had a bit of a debate with one of my mates about it last night, and he was saying, I think you've all gone a bit over the top with how you've reacted to it. And I was like, well, I don't, because it's sort of saying that we can't respect the lockdown, that we don't understand the gravitas of the situation. I think most people do, actually. Do you know what I mean? And most people are quite fearful of what could happen and how it could happen, and worried about family and friends and all that kind of stuff. And you look at how what is quite a weakly enforced lockdown, if we're all being honest, has worked out. And it's worked out fairly well. The streets are empty. People aren't, there's bits and bobs, people sunbathing in parks or whatever, you hear the stories that you hear. But by and large, I think most people going around daily lives would say it's being respected now. So why do we have to envisage a situation, which is what Joe did, where he's like, oh yeah, well, if Liverpool are playing, then it go mad, there'd be thousands at Anfield. And then they're like, well, what about if it was at a neutral venue? Yeah, they'd still do that. Well, you don't know that, Joe. And this situation's never happened before. I get the idea of, Liverpool fans find their way anywhere type of thing. And, you can talk about when we won the league at Wolves or whatever, and there's thousands that tear up and all that. But that's a different time. And that's not when there's a virus flying around. That's not when people are worried about the family. So I can understand why it got the reaction it did from Joe's comments. What about you?
I understand the reaction. My reaction was instinctively the same. I try to be fair-minded, even with somebody I don't necessarily warm towards. I think if you're back in Joe's front room and Joe's pontificating to his family about the furor and antagonisms against him, he's probably saying now, I think his argument would be, hang on, this wasn't a go at Liverpool fans. I think if his beloved, he'd go, if my beloved Blues were on the verge of a title, I wouldn't trust myself not to be there. He might be saying that. That's all I'm saying. Like, I think that's what Joe that would be his defense. Having said that, he didn't say that. He singled us out. And also, more to the point, coming back to this phrase, good faith. If you are known to support a certain team who would benefit from an outcome, you really haven't got. You just forego your rights to have an opinion on this. I know people go, well, you're biased because you want to win the league. It's not unreasonable for us to want a fair outcome for something we've earned. Those that don't want something to happen which they didn't earn, and they want to benefit because of a pandemic. That's bizarre. As the podcast True Geordie so eloquently said, I'm sure you've seen that, Gareth.
Yeah.
About just have a word with yourself if you think that it would be in any way a thing to take some glee from, Liverpool not winning the league in these circumstances. Fair enough if Liverpool fuck up in a sporting way. I actually thought it was bizarre laughing at the Stevie G Slippy in the context of that particular season. But what is unquestionable is to think you can enjoy Liverpool being denied at the expense of lives is frankly weird. Joe's a well-known Blue. And a well-known, and he obviously dislikes Liverpool intently, as is the birthright Blues. He really, really shouldn't have entered this debate, and quite frankly, on balance, deserves all the shite coming his way.
Yeah, that's kind of where I am on it, and I think as well, he surely knows as well that as the mayor of Liverpool, his quotes carry some gravitas. They're going to fly around the media. They're going to be on the BBC. They're going to be followed up in newspapers and everything else. And that's where he needs to have had a think there.
Yeah.
And to me, he didn't really have a think. And now he's created a situation which could have easily been avoided. And it was good for me that the club came out as quick as it did with the statements. I thought both the statements from the club and the Spirit of Shankly were excellent in response. And I kind of think it's done now. I mean, he can backtrack on it, I guess, if he wants, but maybe, just maybe, he's a little bit more careful in future with what he says. But maybe we can't bank on that, to be fair.
I think the more I dwell on it, as I didn't want to dwell too much on Joe Anderson, but the timing of it in a week where I've noticed over the course of the past few weeks, there's been momentums for and against resuming football. 1 week, all the media have got headlines like it's definitely restarting, FIFA are behind it, UEFA are behind it, there's hints the government are behind it, majority of the league. And then the next week, a bit worried. This week, players are showing concerns. France did what France does. Now, for the mayor, Joe Anderson, to the rest of the British public, is just mayor of Liverpool. Once he sticks his head above the parapet, the mayor of Liverpool even says this should be called off. Those headlines will dissipate, but echo, and the ripples from them to UEFA, to FIFA, to the Premier League. Even in Liverpool, they're saying it's a bit mad, and they're the ones who have most to lose in a sporting sense here. Maybe we should just call the whole thing off. And I couldn't say, I don't want to judge Joe as being the worst person in the world, but it may well have crossed his mind that it could have that impact, that he could be seen as the de facto voice of the city of Liverpool in this. And if that was behind his thinking, shame on Joe.
Exactly. That's why he does need to be careful with what he says, and that's why I was arguing my point with my blue friend last night. I want to do something a little bit different before to sort of wrap up. I mean, there's so many things that we don't know what are going to happen here, and we've got to sort of kind of wait and see. And there is a meeting today, as I say, and if that requires a reaction podcast from the Anfield route, we shall do one. If it's some momentous news, we'll be right on it. We're all ready to go and ready to talk about whatever that may be. But I wanted to talk about something different, and I'm glad that it's you that's on, Rob, because I know me and you have talked about it in the past, and you've got the circumstance of you do go to football matches with your sons, one of whom is young. And there was the news this week, which has gone a little bit under the radar because of everything else, understandably so. But that is the news that Manchester United have been given permission to install a safe standing area for 1,500 fans. Now, this trial, whenever that happens, of course, but that is massive, isn't it? Because, we've seen there's been progress on this now. There's been a direction of travel for a while. We've seen the government acknowledge the situation finally. We've seen, meetings at Parliament about it. We've seen what happened at Shrewsbury Town with their section that they got. We've seen even clubs like Spurs sort of having a section ready to go for this. And this is what I mean about the sort of direction of travel. It feels like it will happen now at some point. And Manchester United having this small section is the latest step in that, isn't it? And, you think about our experiences of going on the match. Like, I'm on the cop at Anfield, and I've basically been standing up for the majority of matches for 2 years at least now. In every sort of away end following Liverpool, you're standing up for 90 minutes. Equally at Anfield, the away section of Anfield is standing up for 90 minutes. And so there's all this standing up going on in unsafe areas. And the reason I reference, your son is because that can create really uncomfortable and quite grim situations because it's unsafe to stand in those sections, isn't it?
Yeah. I've long wanted to coin the phrase unsafe standing, that we have unsafe standing in stadia, as you've described, and we have had for a number of years. And if someone described that as being introduced into football grounds, we've got this great idea where the seats everywhere, but it's not feasible, just given what's going on in front of people, that they will sit down. You go, well, that's just not health and safety. Even we can't consider that can't happen. You'd have to have people seat belted in or something, or you just couldn't have the event. It's bizarre that it's been tolerated, and it's not discussed. It's not the first thing that's being discussed when we talk about whether safe standing should come in. You're right. So my experiences, I've had young sons. One of them is still young, and the way I celebrate goals especially away from home, where everyone goes, "Oh, the limbs, the best away ends." I have to say, for me, the best part of the celebration is usually a minute later after it's died down, because my first role is to absolutely shield. I've got to shield him. I've got to get my arms round him, get my back in a certain position that I can take the weight of bodies coming over me. I mean, I've said this probably before on a show. I was at the League Cup final 3 years ago in Klopp's first season, and three lads they'd had a couple of drinks and they were enjoying themselves, but they lost their balance behind me, and the three of them went flying onto my back, sent me. I had to use all the strength I had to not crush my own boy. I came out of the ground. I had lacerated shins, bruises everywhere. I mean, last season I was literally sent flying, but one fella behind me, even more than had a drink, he just collapsed, and because he was standing and I was standing, he just knocked me over. I mean, I missed my lad, and I knocked the woman in front of me flying as well, and she was hurt. It's stupid. I would say there's a part of me that, given what we've been through as a supporter base, I'd have liked to have been at the very vanguard of the change, but we all get why perhaps we can't be. But if we're not going to be second or third to the table on this, I'd like us to be there pretty soon behind Man United in applying for our own safe standing section. I think it's absolutely crucial. Having said that, and there's no having said that, I just have to say that in the current climate, though it seems a distant dream, we're talking about greater proximity, getting more people into the grounds in a safer, more communal way. And obviously, at the moment, you'd be a better bet trying to introduce seats which are 4 meters apart either side. But anyway,
I know. I mean, Manchester United, when they put their statements out, sort of had to say, well, of course we recognise that there's a pandemic, but this is something we've been working on for a while, and people who have been pushing for safe standing and have been talking about it for a long, long time, this is a big breakthrough for them. And, you know, I've said before, obviously, that we went up to Celtic and did some content up there. We went in the safe standing section, and it is infinitely better and infinitely safer than the situation we have now. And I still feel like some people don't fully grasp what we're talking about. You know, it isn't a return to terraces. It isn't a situation where you can have those huge sways forwards and backs like you used to have on the Kop when it was standing. You have a space, you have a barrier in front of you, a barrier behind you, and you stand up and watch the football match in total safety. And those incidents that you've just described, which have happened to probably all of us who regularly go to football matches, simply can't happen. You can't. The barrier is sort of, it's up here. So, like, you know, you're going against the barrier. There isn't a surge. Everyone's got their own space to celebrate, and it's just one of those things as well, isn't it, Rob? That for many of us, it feels natural to stand. You know, when you're singing, when you're shouting, when you're really getting behind the side. It feels weird to do that sitting down in some kind of, like, you know, orderly fashion, as though you're watching an event. You know, this isn't just an event. This is something we're, you know, for many of us, we're passionately into. We feel like we're part of it. And that's why there's that natural inclination to stand and watch it rather than sit.
Yeah, I mean, I do both, because at home I'm not in the Kop. I'm in the Upper Kenny Dalglish stand, and people do sit there. Although I find myself standing up to remonstrate with a referee or punt or celebrate a goal. You obviously do. Everyone gets up to celebrate a goal. But I tell you what, even people are seated, or even people who are watching at home on couches who've never been to a game will do. You'll sit on the edge of your sofa. That thing, edge of the seat stuff. If you loved your team, you're never sitting back. You're never just chilled. It requires physical participation watching football. And you're right to describe how you describe it. I've experienced it once myself in Hoffenheim. Was it season before last? Yeah. When we played that Champions League qualifier over in Germany, they're one of their ends is safe standing there. They had the rail seating so that they could comply with the UEFA guidelines to have seating in Champions League games. So we had the option of both on that night. What I can't quite get my head around, which I'd like, I don't know what you've researched this more than I, and I'm sure I've asked you this before, but I can't remember the answer, is can you get more people in that way? Can you get 3 for every 2 specs in? Could you effectively increase capacities in those areas?
I think you can. I think there is the option to do that, but I think in this country, I'm right in saying, or certainly when they did it in Celtic, I think it was just 1 for 1. I think I'm right in saying they didn't take up the option to do that, but it is possible to do that. But then, you know, I think they are feeling the way in, and there is a recognition of the sensitivities to this even now, in terms of, wrongly in my mind that standing is still referenced around Hillsborough. Hillsborough didn't happen obviously because of standing. It happened because of mismanagement. It happened because of how it was policed and all the story that we know all too well. But there is the sensitivity of how it's seen, how it's perceived, and if you're trying to get this in there and people are like, hang on, you're putting more people in, you can understand why that might create some kind of anxiety. So I think as they're feeling the way in, I think for now, certainly my understanding anyway, is that it's sort of just 1-for-1, but there is the capacity to make it more should they want to. And I think it's interesting as well, you mentioned before, Rob, that, from our perspective, we look at it and say, we'd like Liverpool to be there as well. We'd like Liverpool to be thinking about a section. I think from Liverpool's management point of view, they're probably more than aware of the sensitivities, more than aware that there is still some opposition from Hillsborough families, from some Hillsborough survivors as well. Equally, though, they can't have missed that there was a Spirit of Shankly survey on the subject, and that was overwhelmingly in favour of the idea. And I just wonder now, Rob, with the announcement the other day as well that there's a delay now to the redevelopment of Anfield Road because of coronavirus, and it's basically been put back a year. That maybe gives Liverpool an opportunity there, a little window there to see what happens with Man United, to see what happens with the direction of travel and other clubs, and then maybe, just maybe, there is an opportunity for the Anfield Road to include a safe standing section.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, I'd like to see it on the Cop personally as soon as possible. I'd like to see expand the capacity. Look, even if it only added 2,000 or 3,000 to the Cop, I know you're not going to want me to dwell on this because I get the sensitivities on it, but I do think in the long run it does give the opportunity to increase capacities, and it would be lovely for the Cop to be that bit bigger so that we never have to rebuild it. You know what I mean? I mean, there's always how do we? Because after we've done the Annie Road, we're kind of done in terms of how big we can make Anfield. So it's the last opportunity beyond that point to get capacity up, even if only by a few thousand. But yeah, the Annie Road would be good to, I think you're absolutely right, it'd be good to amend the Annie Road planning to have something in there, although it's quite possible that we could have put a section in the Cop well before that even that stadium's officially open. So a bit of both to my mind.
Yeah, we shall see. One last thing for you, Rob. There's lots of talk with PSG being crown champions in the manner that they have, that that could be the case for Liverpool at some point. How would you feel about what people are calling a title with an asterisk on it?
Well, that's daft. I mean, who's put it? Firstly, who's putting the asterisk on it? Then there are seasons that have got different levels of games, haven't we? 42 game seasons, 40 game seasons, 38 game seasons. I think probably you'll find that there's another number if you drill back far enough. So it doesn't really matter in that sense. If Liverpool are given the title, the only asterisk should be to denote that this Liverpool team actually should have achieved the greatest points total probably in the history of the league, because it's got the greatest points total, getting points total percentage ratio, whatever you call it, 27 wins on 29. That ratio will almost never be bettered in the history of the game. So there's an asterisk. It should denote that achievement more than anything. The thing I'm not asked about things like that. I mean, I've said there's one thing's for sure here. We are not getting our fantasy finish to a season that we would all have liked, right? We've got we can't, and you can't have everything. We've waited a long time. We've got a fantasy team, a team that hasn't just edged towards maybe to a title this season, has blown everything away and has returned the greatest team possibly in the history of the fucking game. Arguably, it's certainly in the conversation for being the greatest team in the history of the game. So you can't have everything, and we're not going to have this perfect party. I do think if we are just awarded it, it's going like PSG. I'd like to think we can find some imaginative ways to have almost like, I don't know, a fucking month-long festival of celebrating this in some way as a supporter body with the club. Okay, PSG have put out a few nice tweets, haven't they? But I was saying this to Gibbo on a show, and he said we don't want to do anything too twee because we're not like this as a supporter base. And so he was I'd said, look, if people can get on their doorsteps to clap for the NHS, even in a lockdown, we can get our doorsteps and do something for Liverpool, even if we're all fucking letting off pyro. Maybe that's not the right idea, but I would quite enjoy the city over, I don't know, of a series. I don't care. Everyone goes on their doorstep every night for a month who's red and does something, and I don't want them necessarily banging tins. There's other things they could do. I'd like to see every house, everywhere decorated in red for a month or so, or a period of time. We can do something to market. The club can do something to market. The club even might. I was thinking this. I don't even see why it's beyond the possibility of the club to do some sort of parade whereby the fans stay on their doorsteps. Obviously, it can't cover every street in the city.
Yeah.
But you know what? Would it hurt the players to go out once a day for a couple of hours for 2 or 3 weeks? I don't. Well, maybe it would in the current club. Maybe I suppose what I'm doing is I'm trying to think. I think we've got to mark this. I think we've got to find ways of marking and get creative about it. It's too early to do it now because we want the season done the right way, or as near to the right way as we can be done. But it isn't just the asterisk isn't important. It's that we mark it, that we acknowledge it, and that we are, well, I don't like this term unbearable, but it's important that we shout it from the rooftops. It's important that we remind the world we have won it. They can shout asterisk back all they like, but what we will say is the greatest team the world has ever seen.
Is right. And I'm with you on the dressing up your house. I really enjoyed it when we won the European Cup, and just going around Liverpool basically and seeing how many houses had made the effort, because that's old school. That's what I remember growing up. I remember obviously like things like, and you will as well, like 86 cup final against Everton, and every house having a little tinfoil FA Cup in the window, and streamers and posters and banners and flags. And there was a bit of that, I thought, for whatever reason. I mean, obviously winning the European Cup helps, but I think it's just more people made an effort this time around, and it was nice. I mean, there was a house on, I think it might be someone Paul Senior knows actually, but there's a house sort of bottom of Queen's Drive near the...
It's a mate of both of us, Dom Levy. Yeah.
Is it? And he just had a massive flag with just the Liver Bird on and nothing else. And every time I drove past it made me smile. I just thought it was great, that.
Do you know what's particularly good about that? It was his wife's family that put that up, because Dom, whose house it is, well, his and his wife's house, but he supports Man United.
Really?
Yes. Sick.
Brilliant.
That makes it even better.
That's superb. See, and even a brilliant story has now been made even better. Talking Reds was worth it just for that. Nice one, Rob. That has been today's Talking Reds. As I say, if there is any big news in the next few hours or whenever it may be, we shall be ready to react at the Anfield Wrap. We'll be putting out content all the way through, podcast, video, and stuff on the website, theanfieldwrap.com. So check all that out. Enjoy your weekend, whatever you are doing with it. Stay safe, stay well. Up the Reds.